almost live from the Herbert I. Greenberg Studios at WHIG. It's Up Late with Sam Bass.
Thank you, Scott Smith, and welcome to the show. First, let's shine a light on our amazing presenting sponsor, Sparkling Creations. As the go-to party rental and event planning company, Sparkling Creations brings you an exceptional range of party rental supplies. Their expertise lies in transforming your event into an unforgettable experience, making sure it's filled with excitement from start to finish. Be sure to visit them at asparklingcreation.com. With Sparkling Creations, you're not just planning an event, you're creating memories that sparkle. So now, folks, we have a truly remarkable guest joining us tonight. I am thrilled to introduce none other than the one and only David Crabtree. He's going to be right here. Ladies and gentlemen, get ready for an unforgettable episode. But first, have you seen what's been going on in the news? Tariffs are coming, or not. Maybe, we don't know. They can't seem to make up their minds. Eggs are so expensive they must literally be made of gold. And federal workers recently received an email from the Department of Government Efficiency, or as everybody likes to call it, DOGE, with a subject line that says, "What did you do last week?" I remember going to school, you come back from school for the summertime, what did you do last summer? This isn't the same thing. This email instructed the recipients to list 5 things that they accomplished in the past week and warned that those that did not reply would lose their jobs. I suppose they're just trying to gauge efficiency. But anyway, I guess they got a little confused because I also received that email. Even though I'm not a federal employee, I guess that the Rocky Mount Chamber must be notable enough to make Elon's list. So anyway, I gave it some thought, and here's what I came up with. I hope it's sufficient. This is the top 5 things I, Sam Bass, did last week. Number 5, I harassed pickleball players. Why not? They were out there swinging their little tiny paddles and wiffle balls, thinking they're in their Wimbledon finals. I can't even say it. Absolutely ridiculous, and they know it. Number 4, I tried on some new elf tights. Don't judge me. Real men wear tights. Did somebody famous say that? Anyhow, it worked out really good for Will Ferrell. Number 4, this was my favorite one, by the way. I participated in a bourbon taste testing in the ABC store. I mean, who knew they frowned on that? Apparently, they don't consider taste testing an official store activity. My bad. Number 2, I interviewed Vladimir Putin. Well, sort of. I mean, our guest tonight has interviewed multiple U.S. presidents, but had never had a go with a Russian one that I know of. Maybe he has. So I thought I'd give it a shot, or actually multiple shots of vodka. Old Putin and I were hanging out in Sam's shack. I think he might have had one too many vodka shots. Not exactly a super chatty guy. He seemed a little bit like a dummy, to tell you the truth. Number 4. Hang on a minute. Number 1. I told you eggs were expensive, right? I smuggled eggs out of a nearby chicken coop. Smuggling eggs from a chicken coop is like playing a game of egg roulette. You never know if you'll crack under the pressure. That's a Greg Fishel pun if I've ever heard one. Or make a clean getaway without getting caught by some peckish chickens. I will not reveal where I hid them. But let's just say the ride home was eggs extraordinary. Every time I hit a bump, I'd squawk and lose one. Look out, Jamie. So there you have it. That's my top 5 things I did last week. You think I'm getting fired? Probably. Maybe not. We'll see. Sit tight. We'll be right back. David Crabtree.
If you're planning a party, wedding, birthday party, baby shower, or corporate event, Sparkling Creations can make it memorable for you. With tents, tables, bouncy houses, and more. We can even provide a fire pit for outdoor events. If you want to be adventurous, we have a mechanical bull. You name the event, and Sparkling Creations has you covered. Located at 976 North Winstead Avenue, Sparkling Creations, where we make every event sparkle.
We're back, and as promised, the man himself, David Crabtree, is here. So we got a lot of questions for you. But first, I want to hit you with a little true or false.
Okay.
Crabtree Creek is named after you.
False.
Okay. You're supposed to ring the bell if it's right.
Oh,
you
well,
can, whatever you want to do. This is your deal.
Got it. I'm left-handed, so things go odd for me sometimes.
Okay. Crabtree Valley Mall is named after you.
If it were, I would be in Tahiti.
You wouldn't be in Rocky Mount, North Carolina.
Well, I might be, but I would have just come back from Tahiti.
Okay,
No, it's not.
I'm going to ask you one more.
Yes, sir.
True or false? You have won 16 Emmy Awards.
It just went to 17.
Wow.
And yeah.
Did you bring any we could hold up?
No, I didn't, but I've been very fortunate. I've had some lucky bounces.
That is awesome right there. 17 Emmy Awards.
Thank you.
Wow.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So I'm going to be serious. I'm kidding around there to start with.
Oh, wait a minute. Why? I felt like I'm in the ABC store where we had a bourbon testing, and it's wig TV. Is this like a political party wig?
No.
Do I know?
And I'm not wearing a wig. Contrary to popular belief, I'm not wearing a wig.
I'm sure you've been asked that before, but I just looked at that logo a moment ago and I thought, wow, I'm back in the 1700s.
Yeah, well, it actually stands for Herbert I. Greenberg, who was the founder of this station. We're in the Herbert I. Greenberg studios.
It's a great studio. I didn't know this existed until I walked in tonight.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming.
Yeah.
So you're a North Carolina native?
Actually, Tennessee.
Oh, Tennessee.
Grew up just outside of Nashville.
How long have you been in North Carolina?
This time, 31 years.
Wow.
And prior to that, I worked in Washington, North Carolina.
Little Washington, as they don't like to be called.
The original Washington.
Right.
And actually, the television station at that time was in Chocowinity, which I had to learn to pronounce when I moved there. I'd never seen, I didn't know the history. So all total, I've had 34, 35 years in North Carolina. It's home.
I actually remember when you were on WITN. I remember those days.
Wow. Thank you for remembering. We're talking 86, 87, 88.
Well, I'm old, that's why.
Well, I'm older.
But not many people from WITN end up on WRAL as the head chief anchor, or whatever they call that position. But you came in after Charlie Gaddy.
Yes.
And I always thought that you had so many similar mannerisms to him. There was just something about you that just fit that slot.
You're very kind, Sam. I have incredible respect for Charlie. I knew of Charlie when I was working, of course, in Beaufort County, and then even when I worked in Colorado for 6 years in Denver, I knew of Charlie and the reputation of Capital Broadcasting. Charlie became a mentor to me, and he respected the fact that I never saw myself as replacing Charlie Gaddy. I was following him. Charlie was Charlie. I was me. And we're friends to this day. In fact, we had dinner just a few months ago.
Well, I actually remember him saying something to the effect of, the person that replaces me, and I think it'll probably be David Crabtree. He said that on the air one time.
He did. His last newscast, and he said, give him a chance. And people did. And so whatever success I had at WRAL came because Charlie paved the way. I literally stood on his shoulders. And I worked with a great team there for 28 years.
Yeah. Well, I know everybody knows you. We talked earlier. I saw you at the beach, and you walked into a restaurant. It was like Elvis Presley walked in. Everybody
well, he's dead. No.
I want to talk about your WRAL career a little bit.
Yes, sir.
So I remember WRAL they were one of the first ones to come along with HD cameras.
The first.
The very
first. The first on the planet.
Wow. That is awesome to think about.
That was Jim Goodman's vision. He knew HD was coming, signed a major deal with Panasonic to buy all HD cameras for the photogs, to buy new floor cameras. It was a risk. At that time, there was one HD monitor in Raleigh, and it was at Jim Goodman's house.
Wow.
There was no HD programming. And we had people on our staff saying, what are we doing? This is nuts. This is crazy.
Wow, what a visionary.
Way ahead of the curve.
So you guys actually covered the Vatican
Yes.
with HD. Tell me a little bit about that experience.
Wow, it was absolutely one of the highlights of my career. It was in 1999, and we were given permission because of a priest who I knew in Raleigh, whose uncle was in charge of all things Vatican, with the idea of, can you imagine, let me back up just a second. Jim Goodman was looking for ways to showcase HD. And I remember one day thinking, can you imagine the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in HD? And from there, we just started asking questions. And we spent 8 days at the Vatican. They had never seen a high definition camera. And it was an incredible experience.
So they were receptive to the idea of you using your HD camera on the Sistine Chapel.
Yes. However, the press person, the director of communications, I never went to a Catholic school, but it was like I was told by my friends who did, when the nuns would rap them on the knuckles with a ruler. It sort of felt like that initially, and so I've known in my career the power of deference. So you just go by the rules, you don't push up against the rules. And little by little, they saw they could trust us and gave us phenomenal access.
Did you get to meet the Pope?
I did. I did. Pope John Paul II. Our day began that day with a mass in the Pope's private chapel and ended in the Sistine Chapel.
God.
For an hour and a half in the Sistine Chapel after hours. And John Paul said to me, okay, I know I'm burning time, but this is a great story. We have been told, whatever you do, don't correct the Pope. If he misstates, don't say anything. So he's talking to us afterwards, and he said, American journalist? I said, yes. And he said, where? And I said, North Carolina. And he had been to South Carolina a couple of years earlier, and he said, I've been there. I just looked at him. He said, I haven't been there. I said, that's right. and then he said, Bible waste. Bible Belt.
Right.
I said, yes. He said, many Baptists. He was wonderful. But as we finished the conversation, he squared my shoulders, I'll never forget this, and said, American journalist, be generous. Be generous. And that has stayed with me for 26 years.
That is a very cool story. So we were talking about earlier, you never interviewed Putin or Brezhnev or none of, but you have interviewed quite a few United States presidents. So Jimmy Carter, Barack Obama, and Donald Trump. So, you know, one time I interviewed Trump, maybe or maybe not. That's kind of an inside joke here. So let's talk about Jimmy Carter first.
Yes.
So that's your first presidential interview.
Well, actually, there were a couple of other interviews in sort of the press gaggle where you're asking questions. The first sit-down interview was with Bill Clinton when I worked in Denver back in 1994 when he was pushing for health care reform. But Carter was the first long form. We sat for a half hour.
Wow.
He was promoting a book that he had written on his mother, Miss Lillian. And it was a great conversation. He talked about, I said, your mother was in the Peace Corps. He said, yes, I sent her away in the Peace Corps because sort of like Margaret Mitchell, she would get a few shots of bourbon in her at 2 o'clock in the morning, and she would start calling reporters at the Washington Post.
That's kind of what I do sometimes.
Why are you being so mean to my boy? And I said, Mr. President, I thought there was no alcohol in the White House. He said, oh no, there was no alcohol for state dinners. My mother always had Jack Daniels at the White House. We laughed heartily about
Folks,
that.
this is information you're not going to get anywhere but from David Crabtree.
He was very gracious. He was so gracious to the entire floor crew that day. He walked around, asked everyone their name, what they did, where they were from, how their family was. It was amazing to see a former president take that time.
He always seems like such a nice and honest man. That's the one thing I really took away from Jimmy Carter.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about when you interviewed Obama. What were some of the highlights of that interview?
It was during his first term. The highlight for me is that we were in the map room at the White House. That's in the lower part of the White House. And I'm looking around thinking, okay, Roosevelt and Churchill and Eisenhower were in this room planning D-Day. How did this kid from this small town in Tennessee end up in this room? And it was a real sobering
I could
moment.
imagine.
And about that time, the president then walks in. And by the way, at every door in that room, and there were many doors where no one was standing, when he walked in, all of a sudden, it was like mushrooms after a rain. There were Secret Service agents at every door with their jacket open like this.
Yeah.
So I remember that.
Yeah.
I do remember this about President Obama. He was very gracious, but it was at a low point in his first term, and it was right after the midterms. And his eyes just looked almost empty to me. And I thought, wow, what weight of the world do these people carry?
That's got to be such a stressful job.
I can't begin to imagine. But again, all of these presidents would never remember my name, but I remember theirs.
So when you interviewed Trump,
Yes.
given his unique style and his public persona, how did you approach that?
We were in a small room at a plant in Morrisville where they were working on a portion of the vaccine formula. That's why he was there. This was in September during COVID, right before the vaccine hit in November. And he was anti-mask or didn't want to wear a mask, but he walked in the room and he's over 6 feet tall. He's an imposing figure, and he had a mask on with a presidential seal. And he said, "Do I have to wear this? Do I need to wear this?" And I said, "With all due respect, Mr. President, you're the president. You can do anything you want to do." He said, "Well, I'm taking this thing off," and took it off. And of course, I had to keep mine on. Here was the deal, Sam. His staff, Secret Service, would not allow us to mic him. And it was just me and a photographer, no big crew. Keith Baker was a videographer that day, and I had to hold a boom mic under my arm and try to steal a glance at my notes, and there was no way to do it. I just had to focus on him. And he, successful politicians know how to filibuster. They know how to burn time real easily. And so it was an interesting conversation. He was gracious.
I could imagine.
He took extra time with us that day.
Oh. Well, I think he does that despite, like I said, his public persona. Sometimes he can come across a little rough. But I think overall, he's fairly generous with his time and with people. So I'm going to get away from politics. You did an interview with the thank you. One of the bombardiers on the Enola Gay.
Oh my gosh.
So before, the Enola Gay was the plane that dropped the first nuclear bomb on Hiroshima, correct?
Yes.
Tell me about that interview and the gentleman you talked to.
His name was Tom Farabee. He was from Mocksville, North Carolina. And Dennis Rogers had written a column on him at the NNO. And I thought this would make a great television story. So we tracked him down. He was living in Orlando, Florida at the time. He had a brother, Bill. Bill served in the Philippines and still lived in Mocksville. Major Farabee living in Florida. We call. He says, "Yeah, I'll do that." He said, "I'm getting older, but if you want to come on down here, I'll do it." I remember pulling in his driveway. It was a Sunday afternoon. And the irony of ironies, parked in his driveway was a Toyota pickup truck.
That is ironic.
And I said to him, either late in the interview or after we had wrapped up the interview, I said, "You drive a Toyota?" And he said, "Yeah, it's a good truck." It never was within him that this was a Japanese-made truck,
Right.
and we were at war with them. It was a wonderful interview. He had no regrets. He was 26 years old with his thumb on that mechanism that once the Bombay doors were open, he hit that mechanism and 6 tons fall. Plane goes up. You know, they've done a lot of rehearsal, a lot of dry runs on this. But he said, "I was just doing my job."
I don't know if I could do that, knowing what you've done when you push the button.
But at 26, and you're at war, Pearl Harbor has happened. We're in the Pacific Theater and the European Theater at the same time. Hundreds of thousands of people are at war, over 1 million, I'm sure. And again, he was just doing his job. I found him to be a remarkable guy. And we finished that day, and he said, "Let's have a beer." And I said, I don't drink beer, and I've got to go back to it. I said, "But I'll sit with you while you," and so we just talked about life. And it was the last interview he ever gave.
Oh, wow.
So we're very fortunate to do that.
Wow.
But here's one of the things, Sam. Jim Goodman, talk about his vision. His vision for local television was always, wherever the story is, we're going to go and do it. People here are going to be interested in something that may be happening in Ukraine or Poland, but they want it told through a local voice. I remember the first time he sent me on an international trip was to Mother Teresa's funeral. This was in 1997. I'd only been here 3 years. And he said, "I want you to go. Don't try to do what the network does. They have 100 people there. We're sending 3. Go and find stories people want to hear through a local voice." It changed the trajectory of my career to be told that.
Well, so that's not the only major funeral you covered,
Yeah,
correct?
I was the funeral guy. I covered Pope John Paul's funeral and Nelson Mandela's funeral in South Africa. What an experience that was. I never thought I would see South Africa. We flew from Raleigh to Atlanta, 14 hours to Johannesburg.
Gosh.
And when the 2 hours we were on air with a live shot in Soweto, standing in, there was one light, a camera, an IFB, and that was it.
Wow.
And I'm standing in a place that I'd seen on Nightline for years, listening to de Klerk and Bishop Tutu debate about apartheid in South Africa. And again, I'm thinking, how did I end up in this spot?
So I would guess on any of these funerals, there's an overwhelming feeling of awe when you go to these type events.
Thank you for that word. It really is. You see, when we were in Calcutta for Mother Teresa's funeral, there were tens of thousands of people every day lined up to view her body. Wow. And 99% of them were Hindu. And I remember talking with folks of saying, "You're Hindu. You're standing out in a temperature that's 98 degrees and 99% humidity for hours." And they said, I said, "You're Hindu, she's Catholic." And I remember this guy saying, "It doesn't matter. She was mother for all. She took care of everyone."
Wow.
So yeah, you do see and learn those things.
You certainly have some great experiences in your career, without question.
And here I am talking to you.
I mean, this is
Here I
probably
am.
the best experience.
Well, it is one of the more unique experiences.
I'll get a bell ring on that one.
No, it's a privilege to sit and talk with folks wherever you are about what we do and the humility we are taught by being in media. it carries a big responsibility with it. I've had a big target on my back for a long time. You know, liberals think I'm conservative and conservatives think I'm liberal. And I've had more than one boss tell me, well, you're not doing your job. You need to really upset people.
Well,
it's like, no.
You're doing it perfectly.
I think I'd rather listen to both sides than try to promote my own thoughts and feelings.
I want to talk a little bit before we get too late in time here about your current position as CEO of PBS North Carolina. Tell me, how did that come about, and tell me a little bit about it.
Peter Hans is the president of the UNC system, and I've known Peter now for, 26, 27 years. Back when he worked for Senator Locke Faircloth's when I first met Peter. He was a young Turk.
I hadn't thought about his name in a long time.
Peter was like 28 years old working in D.C., and we developed, journalists can never be friends with politicians, nor can politicians be friends with journalists. You can be friendly, but you can't be friends because ultimately at some point you're going to have to call them on something, right? And so Peter and I, he was Senator Faircloth's communications director, and we just developed a healthy give and take. They needed to get a message out. We were there. If we wanted to ask questions, we could do that. And fast forward to 3 years ago, my phone rang one day, and it was President Hans saying, would I consider being on a search committee to find the new a new CEO for PBS North Carolina? And I said, sure. And he said, well, tell me what you think of PBS North Carolina, the old UNC TV. And I said, oh, Peter, it is the most underutilized asset in the UNC system. And he said, what do you mean by that? I said, oh my gosh, you have a network across the state. And rarely do I see stories about North Carolina. And he said, well, let's talk a little more later in the week. And after the second conversation, I realized, oh my gosh, he's maybe thinking, might I be interested?
Wow.
One thing led to another, and on April 1st, I took the position, April 1st, 3 years ago, as the interim, and then 6 months later was named permanent. And I never looked back. It has been doing public service, actually living into public service, is the hardest work I think people will ever do. It's also some of the more rewarding work, particularly after having, I was on air in one form or another for 40 years in commercial television news. And so now to be able to hand that back over, particularly to younger people, and maybe to play a role in shaping their career or giving them some things to think about, it's a great honor. I love it.
So I want to get to some fun stuff too.
Yes, sir.
You've been involved in the theater a little bit. What have you done? I mean,
well, I have sung on the stage in London, in New York, in Washington, D.C., in Nashville.
Are you prepared to sing on the stage here?
Well, here's the way I sing on the stage. We'll finish an interview, shooting an interview on stage. And as the videographer is breaking down, I will walk over and very quickly go, Sweet Caroline. And then I realized I've just sung on the London stage.
Okay, yeah.
That's my story.
I get it,
okay?
I get it. So
true story.
I've got one more question for you.
Only one.
So, yeah, we're running out of time, unfortunately. We could
This
probably
is cable. You can go for hours if you want
Well,
to.
I'll get my hand slapped if I do.
Just kidding.
So so I've got a little place out back in my
Apple
house.
juice. This is apple
No,
juice.
it's not.
Yes, it is.
I've got this is too. I've got a little building out back of my house called Sam's Shack. So I play a lot of vinyl out there.
Love vinyl.
Okay. And so if I were to invite you to Sam's Shack and you were to pick, I don't know if you're a cigar smoker, I am. If you were to pick a cigar, a drink of choice, and an album side, what would it be?
Wow. I used to smoke. I don't smoke anymore of anything. So I would leave that one out simply because I'm not a smoker.
Okay.
I would ask you, I don't want to lower your standards, Sam, but could I have a glass of Chardonnay?
We could certainly do that.
Because I really enjoy Chardonnay. And probably would either play side one of Abbey Road or side one of the first album of the White Album.
Excellent choices.
I'm a huge Beatles fan, have been ever since they were on Ed Sullivan. Saw them twice in concert. I've seen Paul McCartney 3 times. And the Beatles channel is on most of the time in my car.
I'm a Beatles fan too, so yeah.
What's your favorite song? Or do you have a favorite song? Can you narrow it to one?
Actually, side 2 of Abbey Road is my favorite side. Side 2. I don't know why. But I don't have you cannot name a favorite Beatles song.
Okay, do you like Wail on She Came In Through the Bathroom Window?
Of course I do. It sounds terrible. So we're out of time.
Like Joe Cocker.
Yeah. But we're completely out of time. Robbie's over there giving me all kinds of hand
Sorry,
signals.
Robbie.
But,
I'm sorry. It's on me. It's on me, man.
I wanted to thank you so much for taking the time to come to Rocky Mountain. I would love to have you back on here again because there's a lot of subjects I had to kind of gloss over. But,
I'm privileged to be here, and I truly mean this. And I know a Sam Bass in Raleigh. Do you know Sam in Raleigh? Who's
camera shop?
He's in investment. Oh, no, I forgot about the camera shop. He's in investments. Wife's an artist, Sharon Bass. Beautiful work.
Don't know him.
They're not in the Bass lineage that you know of.
Maybe, but I don't know.
I'll leave it there. I'll stop right there.
Well, look,
but thank you, my friend.
Appreciate
very
it.
much so. Thank
Very
you.
good time.
Thank you. And it's wonderful to be in Rocky Mount. Love coming up here. I was on this campus when the Bob Ross exhibit was here just a couple of months ago. It was like hair out like crazy, right?
Yeah,
a living chia pet.
Yep, exactly. I actually saw a Bob Ross chia pet at Walmart over the weekend, so it's a real thing.
What a guy.
Yeah, great guy.
Yeah.
Look, we'll be right back. Hey, every Thursday night at 10 o'clock, don't forget to watch. Thanks for watching. See you soon.